Hello, and welcome to the Notary Business Talk, the podcast dedicated to sharing ideas, strategies, and techniques to help grow your business and improve your life. And now, with more than 2 decades of notary business experience, your host, Abraham Zamora, the notary entrepreneur.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Notary Business Talk. My name is Abraham Zamora, and I am the notary entrepreneur. And in this episode, we're going to discuss how to market and conduct hospital notarizations so that you can grow and expand your business, offering additional services that other notaries either haven't done yet or aren't willing to do because they've never done it before, because they're not sure exactly how a hospital notarization should be done. And there is a difference between a regular hospital notarization and just your standard hospital notarization. Now, next to me, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, is a very pretty lady. Now, I can say that because, first of all, she's my special guest, and she's also my wife. My wife here, Monica Zamora, is going to be on the show because she is, and I'll have her introduce herself in just a minute, but she is what's called the speech language pathologist. And the best way she likes to describe what that means is she deals with people from the neck up. And she's worked in the hospitals in the past. She currently works in the school setting with children who have speech difficulties, among many other things as well. And so she's going to talk about kind of the protocol and best practices when we talk about interacting with patients, special needs, because typically when you're going to be notarizing documents in a hospital, it's usually people who are elderly or more frail. So she's going to really give us some insights on kind of what to look out for and sort of how to be able to have the best possible appointment and experience that you can have with your patient. So with that said, Monica Zamora, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
Now, quickly, tell us exactly what it is you do, kind of your title, your experience, and then we'll kind of get into the actual content of this podcast.
All right. Well, thank you. So, disclaimer, you may have said this or not, but I am not a notary, nor have I seen what you guys do when you're out in the field, aside from signings and things like that, right, that I've been involved in myself. Basic notary stuff. But I am a speech language pathologist or speech therapist. We are called speech pathologists because we do identify disorders related to swallowing, cognition, and like he said, everything from the neck up. So when he told me that he sometimes does hospital notarizations, I asked him a little bit about his patients. So I have over a decade of experience working in the medical field. Some of that is skilled nursing facilities, rehab facilities, and of course, inpatient and outpatient. And a lot of my patients have had issues with communication, both receptively, which is how you understand what is being said to you, and expressively, which means how you communicate verbally. And so I found it interesting that he was going to notarize patients in the hospital. I said, what if they're on a machine? What if they can't talk? What if they had a stroke? What if? And I thought it would be cool if I could speak about how we, as what we call SLPs, is our acronym, SLPs, work with patients with communication issues. In this case, how we identify if they are cognitively appropriate and aware to be able to answer questions that are quite significant when it comes to legal matters. Right. And so, again, based on my background, I thought I could provide a little bit of insight when it comes to cognition and cognitive awareness.
Yeah. And as you guys know, being a notary, one of our duties, aside from verifying that they are who they say they are, is to make sure that they know what they're doing, that they are consciously aware of what they're signing, that they're in agreement with what they're signing. And oftentimes you'll run into situations when you're dealing with patients and clients that you want to notarize in the hospital who may have difficulties communicating with you. And so we're going to discuss kind of how do we assess cognitive awareness with our patients, even if sometimes they can't talk, which, by the way, at least here in California, you may want to check with your state specifically, but even if you cannot talk to somebody, if you can still communicate with them and verify that they are aware of what they're signing and are willing to do it, then you can still technically legally notarize them. It's only when it becomes like if say they speak a different language and they want to get a translator, then you cannot do that. You have to be able to directly communicate with that individual that's going to be notarizing. So she's going to give us some insights on how to do that. But let me give you guys an overview and an outline of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about basically protocols and best practices that you guys should consider when going in to notarize documents for a client inside of a hospital or really any kind of medical facility like a nursing home or a skilled nursing home like she mentioned. We're also going to talk about some specific tools of the trade that I really find helpful when it comes to notarizing patients inside of a hospital, because again, a lot of them can't sign very well. They can't hold a pencil. They're very weak and they're frail. So things to kind of make your job a lot easier, things that, some of the stuff I didn't end up learning about until years later and then realize, wow, what a difference. So hopefully that'll save you, these tips will save you guys a lot of trouble and stress moving forward. And then finally, I'm going to go over quickly how you would market for hospital notarizations, how you can actually attract and get more business when it comes to notarizing documents in the actual hospital. But now, before we get into all this, let me just mention that this show is made possible by listeners like you guys who support this show financially. And so if you would like to support the show financially and get some additional perks like being invited to Ask Me Anything type of special shows, I would encourage you guys to go to patreon.com/notary to become a member. And it's as little as $5 a month. Really helps promote the show, helps me continue doing this. And if you guys find value in what I do, I encourage you guys to do that. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, we talked about the differences between a regular notarization and a hospital notarization. And the difference really is the condition of the actual patient. Now, let's get into basically the most important thing, which is identifying awareness. Now, my wife, which by the way, I know a lot of you guys have heard about my wife through my previous episodes and how we got married. I told you guys all those stories. I don't think I've ever told them about the how we met story. Well, we won't get into that yet, but if you guys would like to hear the story about how we met, leave a comment below or send me a message on LinkedIn or an email, and maybe we'll...
If you want to know, we'll do a show. It's really funny.
It's a funny, interesting story, yeah. Well, so if you guys are interested, we'll definitely consider telling that story in the future. But the reason this came up is because I was going to go into a notarization where the gentleman was not really able to speak. And when I told my wife this, she's like, hey, these are some questions you might want to consider. So go ahead and maybe recall what it was exactly that you told me, babe, and then kind of how what are some questions and some ways we can identify if someone is consciously aware of what they're doing.
Well, what was the situation again?
So, yeah, thank you. We should probably recap it. So, well, it was that. Just I was going to go do a notarization for someone who could not technically speak very well. They had some sort of machine. And the idea was, am I able to notarize someone if they can't speak? Now, they were actually able to speak better than I thought they could. Okay. But in a situation where they may not be able to speak at all, what should we look for, and how would someone like you or like a doctor assess if someone is actually aware of what's going on, if they're competently aware of what's going on?
Okay, so now I think I remember. So what happened was you were going to assess someone that couldn't really speak, and I said, well, how do you know if they know what they're signing? How do they communicate that to you? Let's say it's what do you call those deed thingies? Deed of trust or trusts? House deed. What is it called?
I'm going to just let you keep going and have you suffer here.
Deed or whatever. Sign it off to somebody, right? Your kid or whoever.
Sure, like a grant deed.
There you go.
Like
those thingies.
Yeah.
So that sounds super important, okay? So you're going to sign this away, but how do you know if they're cognizant,
or
right?
Power of attorneys.
There you go.
Yeah.
So It's like you just ask them, are you this person? Do you want to give away your house to your kid who you haven't talked to in 30 years or something? It could be anything, right? So how do you identify that? And you basically just ask them, I guess. Now, as an SLP, I would approach it quite differently. And so I would want to know basic stuff. Now, there's something called HIPAA, right? HIPAA says, it's basically don't ask too many questions because it's none of your business, right? HIPAA protects you from getting sued, and particularly in California where everybody's sue happy. So HIPAA protects the patient most of all, okay? So you don't want to ask too many questions, but you do need to know if the person is oriented and aware. And so I'm assuming before you go see a patient in the hospital, you want to know why they're there. And usually sometimes, I mean, from observation, right? You don't have to even ask. Sometimes they'll tell you, you know, my dad has stage 4 cancer, or my wife just had a stroke. So I'm assuming you kind of sort of know the situation before you go in.
Yeah, and I typically will ask, you know, what is their cognitive awareness? Are they aware? Can they communicate? I don't always ask them specifically their conditions, particularly over the phone. And even when I'm there, I don't ask them what their condition was and why they're there. My biggest concern is, can they communicate? Are they consciously aware of what's going on? That's typically what I'll ask the family member that's usually calling me to go in and see, you know, the patient, which is usually a relative or their father or something. So that's what I typically ask.
Well, see, and I kind of have a problem with that, because a lot of times when you're trying to conduct business as a family member, you'll say something like, oh, yeah, they're fine. They understand.
Sure.
But how do I know that, right?
Right.
So the pointers I gave you was, as, again, a speech language pathologist who has to conduct assessments in order to identify if the person understands, is I would approach it with a basic knowledge of what's going on. Again, this is why I'm saying whether or not the family is going to give you an actual diagnosis, such as car accident and they hit their head, right? That lets me know it's a traumatic brain injury. So things like that, I kind of want to know without breaking any HIPAA laws. Again, as if I were what you are, which is a notary. So I would like to have a basic understanding of what is going on. Again, you mentioned a machine. So ventilation, right? Being able to breathe with the breathing tube. It's whether or not a patient is intubated, basically. And so I need to know kind of the gist of what is going on.
Well, let's just say this. Let's just say, because most notaries, if they start asking questions like what exactly most notaries won't know what a car accident versus a stroke, how that's going to affect a patient, because they don't have the experience as someone in the medical field. Most notaries will just ask if they are competently aware. So let's just assume that the person that's calling us says, yeah, they can communicate. They know what's going on. They know what they're signing. Now, me personally, I will tell my client, the people that are sending me out, I'll be like, okay, great. Now, if they say, well, sometimes they're having good days, sometimes they're not having good days, I will tell them this. I'll say, look, here's a caveat. If I go out there and they're not able to communicate with me, I won't be able to notarize a document. And in my case, I tell them that I'll still charge them for going out there and making the trip. That way they know they can't just say, okay, I'm going to just say that he's fine and hopefully he'll do it anyway. I let them know, look, I'm still going to charge you if I go out there, even if he can't speak. So, be honest with me is essentially what I'm saying to them, because I need to be able to know they're competently aware. But let's just assume that they say that the patient is competently aware. Fine, that should be enough. Go ahead.
By the way, that's a great strategy, because that does kind of weed out that scary possibility that they're just saying that they do understand.
Right.
And I think you mentioning, and I was going to actually talk about that, the fact that you do that ahead of time and say, listen, if I go out there, I do expect to get paid. If they are not aware, then I still expect payment. I think that's actually a really good strategy.
Yeah, and it's a filter, right? So that way it kind of weeds out those who might be lying to you just to try and get you to go out there. They know that there's sort of monetary consequences for doing that. So, but let's just assume now we're at the table and you meet the patient. What are some things you would ask the patient to find out if they know what they're doing, if they're consciously aware, particularly if they... Now, listen, guys, if the patient can talk and you can have a conversation with them, then that's a no-brainer, right? We're talking about a situation where they physically cannot talk. They either have they're intubated, which means they have a tube down their throat and they can't speak. There are multiple reasons why someone could not talk, right? But they could possibly nod their head and respond with yes or no questions. So if they can do yes or no questions, what are the questions that you told me to ask that I thought was just brilliant to find out if they really knew what they were doing?
Okay, so again, I understand that you can't ask those questions necessarily about why they're in the hospital in the first place. But yes, let's say you get there. It's evident that the person has a tracheostomy tube and is on the ventilator. So again, can they say yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down,
right?
Types of responses, head shakes, yes, no, things like that, or possibly even writing. And so what we typically ask is egocentric, yes, no questions. For example, if the man's name or woman's name, let's say it's a man, the man's name is Bob, okay? I might say something like, listen, I know the questions I'm about to ask you are a little bit silly, but I'm just trying to make sure that you are understanding what I'm asking. So is your name Bill? They might shake their head no or give me a thumbs down or write no.
Right.
Okay. Is your name, I don't know.
You said Bob, right?
Yeah. Is your name Tim? No. Is your name Bob? Yes. Okay. We've got that established. Okay, Bob, are we in the hospital? Yes. Okay. Or if it's kind of iffy, I might say, are we at school right now? Or are we at church right now? Or, it could be anything. Okay. One more question. Let's say family is in there. Typically they are, right? Especially in this case. Let's say the wife is standing next to him. I might say, okay, Bob, is this your sister? No. Okay, is this your cousin? No. Is this your wife? Yes. Is your wife's name Samantha, for example? Yes, everything. Okay, so then I know he knows basic egocentric questions, and then I go from there.
Right.
Okay, do you know why I'm here? Okay, do you know what this document is? And then, I'm just assuming here again, I don't do your job, but, so I usually start out with those egocentric questions. Here's a little example of why. I've had plenty of stroke patients, and they have issues with understanding spoken language, written language, etc., and difficulty expressing. And by the way, that's called aphasia. Some of you, unfortunately, right, have had family members who have had brain injuries such as a stroke, dementia, different things. Mm-hmm. And so I've worked with a plenty. And so one of the things that ends up happening sometimes, and for future reference, be careful with this in the hospital, is, a RN or a doctor will come in. Do you have pain? Shaking their head, yes, right? Or saying yes. Okay. Can I get you medicine? Yes. Okay. Okay. Is this, XYZ medication okay? Yes. And you notice everything is yes. So then I go in and let's say it's another gentleman, it's a man, like Bob. So then I go in as the SLP and I say, hi, are you a woman? Yes. Okay. Are we at church right now? Yes. Okay. Is your hair purple? Yes. Yeah. So one time, I'll never forget it. I did it while a doctor was in the room, and the doctor kind of looked at me like, uh-oh, because right. It's you. These people can look completely normal. I hate that word, but normal. And you think they're understanding you,
right? And
they could play it off very well. And so that's why I tend to ask those types of questions. Now, before you interrupt me, mister, no, I'm just kidding. What I want to say is this. When there's family in the room and you think, again, based on diagnosis, and I get it, notaries versus SLP, and I have more of a scope on this. But based on diagnosis, if I know someone has had a stroke or a brain injury or anything going on with their head, I tell the family, I kind of preface it. Like, listen, I'm going to ask some questions and they're kind of silly. Just let me do what I got to do and don't interrupt me. Don't speak for them or anything. Just let me do this real quick. Sometimes when patients are cognizant, and you preface it with it sounds kind of silly, but they'll oftentimes mess around with you, which can actually be a good thing. It means, they're aware and they're kind of playing along with it. But yeah, that overall is the point of how you want to make sure that someone can answer those basic egocentric questions and then move along from there as you normally would, hopefully.
Yeah. And I think this is important because typically as notaries, when we're not really, again, she made a very important point there, is that oftentimes they look fine, right? They look normal. They can talk to you sometimes, or at least communicate in some way. And most of us would go in there and say, do you know what you're signing? And they'll say, yes. Is this, do you understand what this grant deed means, or this power of attorney? And they'll say yes. And do you want so-and-so to be your power of attorney? Yes. For us, that sounds like it's awareness, but they may be saying yes to everything. So the yes, no type questions, where they would be forced to answer no if it's not really the right answer, lets you know they have an awareness of what's going on. They're not just answering yes to everything. Now, let me mention one other thing, and this is, again, I don't want to give too many of these specific laws because it may be different in other states, but in California, even if that person has a dementia or Alzheimer's, and at times their awareness goes in and out, maybe they have episodes where they forget stuff, but then they're fine other days. As long as they're okay when you're notarizing them, legally you can notarize that document. Now, don't take my word for it in other states, but in California, that is the case. So someone might say, yeah, they have Alzheimer's or some kind of neurodegenerative disease. Well, okay, but as long as they're okay when they're signing, legally you're okay to do that. Okay, so just a little side point. Now, one of the things that a lot of us don't realize is that the hospitals can be a pretty germy, dirty place. And so what are some hygienic things that we should consider when it comes to, because we're going to talk about using some tools, and obviously people are going to be using your pens and they're going to be signing your notary journal. How dangerous is it to get sick in the hospital? I mean, what are some stuff? I mean, I don't want to gross people out. If you're having dinner right now, maybe you should skip this part. I don't know if it's going to be that bad, but
no, don't skip it. That way you'll wash your hands. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, let's talk about getting in there and protecting yourself.
Yeah, protecting yourself from getting sick, right? Because I mean, this is a place where, and we know from COVID, it's important, right?
So let me talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
So I actually worked in the hospital for about 10 years, and then I switched over to the school setting. But when COVID hit, I went into the trenches, and I looked like, in the E.T. movie where they wear like those space suit looking things and stuff. And I went in there, and my whole family told me, don't do it, because this is pre-vaccination. And I said, no, I got this skill, and I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to, help treat everybody. But, germs are real, and they're real scary sometimes. And so if you go in there and you're going to notarize someone, I would like for you to take some knowledge in there with you when you're in the hospital. First of all, don't ever take your children. I can't tell you, and this is kind of going off on a tangent, but I can't tell you how many kids I've seen in the hospital, and they're just crawling on the floors and touching their mouths and stuff. Like, I just want to scream, because they're probably going to end up sick after doing that. So make sure you go in there alone. Make sure you take the precautions. I was the type of hospital worker that I would go to work, and when I would come home, I would take off my shoes and leave them outside. So again, it may sound germaphobe, but let me tell you some basic stuff. When you go in, you're going to obviously check in, and when you get to the floor, it could be inpatient, it could be skilled nursing facility. Usually those are single level. But when you get to where you need to be, you're going to want to check in with the nurse. I don't know if you guys do that, but I highly, highly, highly recommend it. And sometimes you can't see the patient without doing it. Have you done that?
Yeah. So in my experience, usually I never meet with the nurse. I just walk into the room.
Okay. I don't recommend you doing that.
Well, wait, how come?
Okay. So there is a, RN at the desk of whatever unit that you're going to be. Okay.
Yeah.
She manages the floor, she or he, right? you want to check in with the RN. Okay, it may not be your patient's RN, but it's the RN running the show there. Okay, in that unit.
Like the manager.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the reason for that is because you don't know if the person you're about to see has what's called airborne precautions, right?
Okay.
Or contact precautions. Okay. And so you don't know that, and you don't want to go in that room without checking in with somebody. And they will tell you. You identify yourself, okay? And then you say, I'm going to go see patient. Is there, patient Bob? I like that we created this Bob character.
Now, let me ask you this real quick. Now, normally we would check in at the front, at the very front lobby when you check in. They'll ask you what room and what patient. Wouldn't they know if there are some sort of special conditions related to that patient?
At the front desk?
At the front desk?
No.
They wouldn't know.
This is going to be more in the unit.
Okay, all right.
I mean, maybe they do, but there's probably 400 people in that hospital.
So they wouldn't say, oh, you can't see that patient unless you have some kind of protection. That would be something we would need to ask the head nurse on that floor.
Typically.
Okay, fine. Fair enough.
To my knowledge, I don't know if they know that, and they possibly could.
So we would walk into the head to the room, talk to the head nurse, and what would we ask that nurse?
Yeah, so it's called a charge nurse, and you say, I want to see patient Bob, and may I go in there right now? You don't know if they're cleaning his behind, right? You don't know if he's not even in there because he's in X-ray, CT, MRI. You don't know, so you want to check in.
Okay.
But the main reason is because you want to protect yourself and you want to protect your family for when you're going home, okay? Yeah. So airborne is something like TB. TB is still out there. I've been exposed to TB. You have been exposed to TB. I'll get a postcard, right? And then I got to go get checked. That's an airborne precaution. Guess what else is? COVID, the flu. Those are all airborne. And 'tis the season. We're in January currently. It's cold and flu season. Yeah. You don't want to go in there if the person has a flu. Okay? That's also what we call a comorbidity. You're going in there because they have stage 4 cancer. Well, something else that they can develop while in the hospital is like a flu or a TB or something. Everything kind of travels around. That's what I'm saying. Okay, let's say they don't have an airborne precaution. They have contact. Well, what that means is they might have something, I'm just going to say it, you can Google it later, C. diff, MRSA, icky things, right? Well, guess what? You're going to want to protect yourself. Ever since COVID, people know now about things called PPE, right? Protection equipment, personal protection equipment. And so as a notary, if you're going to go in a room where you need to have PPE, you should know and you should get it, and you will. Because you don't want to get sick and you don't want to get your family sick. So common PPE is going to obviously be gloves.
Okay.
Right? And a gown. Usually they're yellow and they're outside of the door. Now, why do you want to check in with the charge nurse? Because someone will help you. Okay? There's actual procedural ways to put these things on.
Right.
Okay? Let's say it's a regular room. Okay? You're just going to visit a regular patient. No PPE necessary. Well, guess what? Sani your hands in, like In-N-Out Burger, Sani your hands out. And if you're not from California, you're missing out.
Yeah.
In-N-Out Burger.
In-N-Outs are good.
Anyway, Sani in, Sani out. Sanitize those hands, get them all over. Sometimes I even Sani my pen, okay? But personal protective equipment, you need it if you're going to go into a room that has a contact precaution. Let's say you can't find the charge nurse. It's a terrible hospital. You can't find any good help, And so you know what? I'm frustrated. The people are waiting for me, and I'm going to go check in at the room because I can't find anybody. So then you go to the room. Always look outside the door, because if you need PPE, it will say that you need PPE, and it will say what kind. It will say even if when you leave that room, you cannot sanitize, you actually have to wash your hands. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I've never even looked. That's interesting.
Yeah. So there will be a sign on the door that says, okay to sanitize or must wash hands for 30 seconds or more.
Okay.
So this is the kind of stuff I'm telling you. If you go into one of those nasty rooms that you have to wear the gown and all that stuff, and I say nasty rooms, not the patient, of course not. It's not their fault that things happen and stuff travels and it gets to them. That's not what I mean. But anyway, the nasty room, the nasty floors, One thing that I do is I will, after I take off the gown and do all those things, I'll wash my hands, obviously, and then I will sanitize all of my equipment. Mm-hmm. When I go home, I don't walk in the house with those, clogs or whatever I was wearing that day. They stay outside. Obviously, you may not have hospital shoes like most of us hospital workers. So what you can simply do is Lysol them, just, wipe them with something.
Spray
then come into your house, if you bring shoes into your house. Some people don't.
That's good. Yeah, that's interesting. By the way, stuff that I didn't do, and again, I mean, there are, we don't want you guys to freak out. There are germs everywhere, but the hospital is different because it's a concentration of sick people. I mean, that's why they're there. And so, and I've had to wear the gowns where they told me, before you go in there, you need gloves, gown, and a mask. And they've literally told me there's no way of going in there unless you do that. So they have told me at times. But sometimes people get in a car accident and none of those things actually apply. And in those cases, I guess you wouldn't have to do that. But in spite of that, it sounds like you're saying, in spite of that, as a just standard practice, sanitize and make sure you kind of have your equipment clean. So that makes a lot of sense.
Sanitize and just check in with the nurse. Check in with the charge nurse or the patient's nurse. Just make sure it's okay to get in there. And please don't let this stuff intimidate you.
Yeah.
No.
It's great advice.
It's just, basic stuff that you should be aware of.
This is crazy, guys. Now, just so you know, we didn't rehearse this ahead of time. We didn't talk about what we're going to talk about. I'm actually learning something brand new right now that I had never done. I've been doing this for over 22 years, and I've never checked in with the head nurse and asked if there are any precautions or anything I should be aware of when it comes to like maybe wearing a mask or wearing gloves. But this is really good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, one of the things I will tell you guys is that, especially recently, using certain tools and having the right equipment, really the right tools for your craft, specifically for hospital patients, because a lot of them are sick, they're frail, they have a weak grip because they're sick and they can't sign, or they've gone through a lot. It's very, very sad, difficult for a lot of these people are elderly and have a hard time sometimes seeing very well, but they know exactly what they're signing and that sort of thing. So I want to share with you guys 3 tools that I've come up with, that I use, and that have been very helpful when it comes to notarizing and things that I think you guys should have. And I'll make sure I leave a link in the show notes, or if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll have a link to Amazon where you can get all this stuff if you wanted to go out there and get it. But the first thing is obviously a clipboard, right? A clipboard, and just a basic standard clipboard. Particularly when people are bedridden and they have a hard time signing, they usually don't have a table that they can sit up on, and so they need some kind of hard surface to sign on. So typically a clipboard is and it sounds like a no-brainer, but a lot of notaries that I speak to don't carry one of these around. And not only for the hospital, right? Even if you're signing at a client's home when they don't have a table because they're moving or they're in the process of remodeling. Having a clipboard with you at all times is really, really valuable. The other thing that I like to have, particularly for hospital notarizations, is these. You want to show these, honey? These.
Yeah.
What are these?
They're grippers, maybe. I don't know.
Pen grippers.
But so in I will.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna grab. Oh, check that out. Okay. So I've worked with a lot of OTs, occupational therapists. And so they're kind of the ones that take charge of what is fine motor movement. And in the case of someone with fine motor movement issues, such as writing, we can use a variety of grippers to help them.
Yeah. And so what I'll do is I carry these in a little baggie like this, and then I just carry them with me in my notary bag. One of the things you told me is after they use them, obviously,
sanitize them,
just like you would sanitize your pen. The pen that you use is also very important, because ballpoint pens seem to not work very well when someone has a weak grip. They have to push hard on it for the ballpoint to actually work. So and my wife and I, who both, I guess you can say we both work in the hospital in the sense that I go in there and take care of stuff, is these gel pens. Now, this isn't the one we actually use, but we have these gel pens, and I'll put a link in it. It's a medium fine. Yeah, but really any gel pen would work. We have a specific one that we just absolutely love. So I'll put a link to it in the show notes and in the link in the comments below. But gel pens seem to work really, really well when it comes to signing. And then the last thing that we really like to do is use this sort of signature. See if you can. Oh, there. Thank you. Yes, a signature helper. So it's a little metal sort of credit card size contraption. It's like metal but basically what this does is it helps your signer stay inside of a little specified area. If they have a hard time seeing the lines, for example, this really sort of highlights where they have to sign. And it also, because it is metal and it's slightly thick, it keeps the signature within the signature box or the signature area. So if they're having a hard time with moving their hand, this will save your life. I mean, these little tools. This is like $12. This was like $10. Will make your job so much easier when it comes to actually notarizing patients in the hospital. Is there anything else you want to say about these?
Yeah. So one other thing that might be beneficial is they have, I think it's 3x, 4x, 5x, or 10x magnification, and it's kind of around this big, this size. I don't know if that might be beneficial, but I've had to use that with some patients.
Oh, that's right.
When they're reading, because I test reading. And so I'll have this kind of magnification that kind of just slides across to help with reading.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
With visual.
Good. Now, let's finish up with kind of how to market for this kind of business. This is considered general notary work. So obviously there are 3 types of notary work we can get out that we can have as notaries: signing agency work, or we're signing loan documents. Then you can get direct notary work, which is working directly with escrow and title offices, and getting your own general notary work, which is what this falls under. I'm going to go really quick over this, but it's pretty standard. Most of the work you're going to get, and I'm look a little blurry here. There we go. Most of the work that you're going to get for hospital notarizations are going to come from people who are going to Google a notary near whichever hospital it is you're looking for, whatever hospital that they are looking for a notary to come out to them. So the idea is to have, SEO visibility so that when people Google that specific hospital and a notary near that hospital, you pop up. And so obviously you want to have a Google My Profile page so that people know that you exist and that Google knows that you exist. And you should have a website attached to that Google My Profile. And that website should have specific web pages that talk about that specific hospital that you're trying to get business for. Because what will happen is when people Google for that specific hospital, Google will know that your website talks about that hospital and will show your information, and it'll show you as a possible option for them to call and use as a notary, because the whole purpose of the Google algorithm is to give people what they're looking for. Let Google know you offer this service by mentioning it on one of your web pages, and it's going to make it a lot easier for you to be noticed when people search for a notary near that hospital. Another thing you can do is write a blog about that hospital and kind of sort of some protocols and this check-in process. Make it educational so people know what it is that what it is that you do when it comes to offering that service at the hospital. And then the last thing, believe it or not, is actually creating YouTube videos, short videos, and having enough keywords describing specifically what you do and how you notarize documents. The video is fine. But what's really important is the description of the video, the text part of it. If you mention the hospital that you do notarizations, you mention the city and the name of the hospital, all those things will help people find you online when Googling for a notary for that specific hospital. Now, I know you don't, do a lot of the notary and marketing stuff, but is there anything you want to add to that?
No.
Okay, very good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that sort of brings us to the end of this show. I hope you guys enjoyed the show, and I will mention again that if you guys got value out of this show and would like to support my work and what I'm doing here, I would invite you to go to patreon.com/notary Notary, and I'll make sure I have the link in the show notes for that to help support the show. And there are some additional perks that you'll be able to get and special access to me. You can actually become a member for free, but if you want to support the show and get those special perks, then you can definitely support the show financially. And also, you know, one of the best ways, and I mentioned there's 2 ways of making money as a notary. 1 is doing loan signings, 2 is getting direct business, and 3 is offering more than just one thing, which is just notary. Most notaries nowadays do more than one service. They either are real estate agents, they might do wedding ceremonies, they might do Medicare insurance, financial services. This is a way to leverage your notary business and offer more value to your clients and get paid more money in the process. And many of you know that I have a business partnership with Ronnie at Unlimited Ink Notary. Well, I also have a business partnership with a friend of mine who does financial services, and he's actually looking for people who might be interested in pursuing that as a career. If that's something that might pique your interest, I would encourage you guys to email me. My email is contact@notarybusinesstalk.com, and I'd be, depending on how the conversation goes and we find that it might be a good fit for both of us, be happy to introduce you to my business partner and at the same time show you how you can grow your business and how you can use your business to grow a financial services career if that's something that piques your interest. So if that's the case, reach out to me, send me an email, or find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to have a chat. But that concludes our show. So until next time, be well, take care, and stay productive. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye now.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Notary Business Talk. To learn more about becoming a notary entrepreneur or to find out how Abraham can help you achieve your business goals, visit notarybusinesstalk.com.